Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best AD carries right now for patch 6.24. This list is still probably going to be relevant for patch 7.1 because the only AD carries getting changed in 7.1 are Draven, Kalista, and Lucian, and those changes that they're getting, I don't think are really going to make them like that much stronger, that they're really going to move anywhere on the tier list. So with that being said, let's get started. So first here, if we take a look at the tier 1 champions for this patch, the first champion in tier 1 is going to be Zigs. So Zigs right now in the bot lane as an AP carry bot lane champion is actually super strong for a few reasons. Now I know that this pick is definitely kind of controversial and a lot of people don't really like it. Some people think it's like super strong and really good, and then other people just think it's really crappy and it shouldn't be played bot lane. But the reason to why it works bot lane and why people are playing it there is because of the tower pushing potential it has and the fact that it can get first blood tower a lot of the time, and because there's such a good bonus now for getting that first blood tower, it does give you that incentive to play Zigs in the bot lane. He also does outtrade most AD carries in the early game, and if you do pair him up with a strong engaged support, then you can definitely go very aggressive in lane and look to pick up kills. A lot of players just won't know how much damage you're gonna do as Zigs in the early game, so you can use that to your advantage to get a few kills and just get a nice snowball going. His damage output in the early to mid game is also a lot stronger than your standard AD carry. So someone like a Vayne especially, or even like a Caitlyn in the mid game, a Zigs is definitely going to be a lot more useful. And even in the late game, he still can be a very strong pick because his ultimate can one-shot any squishy target. So as long as you can hit your skill shots with him, you can still be very successful in the late game. I feel like some people might think that like by playing Ziggs bot lane, you're going to be losing out on that late game compared to playing like a standard AD carry, but honestly you're not, as long as you can hit your skill shots. And then for when you should not pick Ziggs in the bot lane, try to play him with a more aggressive support champion. You've got a very strong early game, so try to avoid playing him with supports like Janna or Soraka. I would recommend pairing him up with someone like a Leona, a Thresh, even a Zyra lane or a Malzahar is super good for the laning phase. And then also, I would not pick him if your team already has 2 AP champions. So if you are like 4th or 5th pick and your mid laner's already got an AP champ locked and your top laner has an AP champion as well, then I'd just pick a standard AD carry in that situation. And then also pick him if you are lacking like AP damage. So if you do have like a full AD comp, then that's a great time to pick Ziggs in the bot lane. So next up here in the tier 1 is going to be Twitch. So Twitch is definitely one of your best standard AD carries that you can play right now. He does have one of the best, if not the best, late game for any AD carry right now. He also does have like a really good mid to late game power spike once you do finish your core items of Infinity Edge, Runins, and then once you get either Static Shiv or Phantom Dancer. I feel like that spike on him is really good, and that's where you can really start to pop off in team fights. Once you do get to your late game build as Twitch though, you don't even need to really position well as him in team fights to end up winning your team the game. All you really have to do with max build Twitch is just get a few autos off with your ultimate in a team fight, and you can end up like getting a triple kill in an instant just because of the AoE damage you can do like with your ultimate and your Runins. I've definitely had a few games where I've just like basically suicided into the enemy team, but because I was able to get like 3 or 4 autos off, I ended up basically killing their whole team. He does have a pretty good laning phase too as well. After they did change his W to where it now does stay on the ground for a few seconds, it does allow him to zone in the laning phase pretty good, and it does also allow him to like pick up some CS if he is getting zoned himself. So if you are getting zoned by the enemy, then you can throw your W down on the CS and then use your E from range to like get a cannon if you're gonna miss out on it from your auto range, or to just pick up some CS. I think the stealth with his Q is definitely one of the best parts of his kit, because if you do get ahead with Twitch in the laning phase, then you can look to go for a roam top lane or mid lane. I've definitely done this multiple times as Twitch, and the enemies just won't expect it. They're not going to expect the AD carry to roam at around like 10 to 12 minutes, so look to do that as him and take advantage of that stealth with your Q. And then for when you should not pick Twitch, I would try to avoid Vi and Hecarim if you can. Usually when I'm playing Twitch, I just ban out Vi every single game because it's so annoying to deal with her ultimate and her dive in team fights. And then also, he is great in like most other situations. If you know how to play your Twitch, then you can do really well with him. Next in the tier 1 here is going to be Caitlyn. So Caitlyn right now, in my opinion, is probably your best low risk, high reward AD carry that you can play. She's got a really strong laning phase, a lot of kill pressure in the laning phase if you do pair her up with an aggressive support. She does have a little bit of a mid game power trough, but once you do get your 3 items and then beyond that point, you can deal so much damage in the late game. I've definitely seen many Caitlyn players, like once it does reach late game, they can basically solo carry a game. A lot of high elo players right now are just playing Caitlyn to climb because she's just a very strong AD carry right now. She's got a gap closer in her kit with her E. Her traps are definitely probably one of the best parts to her kit, because if you do end up playing her with a champion that does have some sort of lockdown, like in the bot lane, if you play her with Morgana or if you play her with someone else who does have lockdown, then it's very easy for you to combo that with your trap, and the amount of damage your traps do if the enemies step on them is just pretty disgusting, to be honest. You can half health a squishy target with your trap, like in the early game even, which is super crazy. And then unlike Twitch, she can actually do a pretty good job at dealing with those dive champions that are being played right now. So if you are in this situation where you're like last pick AD carry and you have to decide between like Caitlyn or Twitch, then just take a look at what the enemy team comp has. If they have like a Hecarim and like a Malphite and just a super strong dive comp, then I would lean towards Caitlyn in that situation. And then for when you should not pick Caitlyn, you can pretty much pick her into anything right now, and you can at least go even in the laning phase. I would look to pick her for sure against someone like a Vayne or even an Ezreal though, because in the laning phase, you just outrange those AD carries by quite a bit. Ezreal does have his Q, which will outrange your auto attacks, but Ezreal's standard autos are going to be much shorter range than Caitlyn's auto, so as long as you do stay behind minions, then I find that you can do pretty well against Ezreal in lane 2. And then the final champion here in the tier 1 category for this patch is going to be Jhin. So Jhin is pretty unique compared to most of the other AD carries in the tier 1 or even in general, because he's got great utility for an AD carry with his W and his ultimate. So I feel like Jhin actually does have a little bit more raw carry potential than some of the other AD carries if you can play him correctly, because you can look for picks like with your W and your ultimate, and you don't really have to rely on your team to be engaging. If you do see the enemy caught out of position, then you can open up with your ultimate, and if you do end up hitting your ultimate shots, then you're going to provide that slow. After your ultimate's done, you can follow up with your W, and if you can play Jhin correctly and you can hit those skill shots, he's definitely a very strong AD carry. He also does have a lot of kill pressure in lane if you pair him up with an aggressive support, so I would look to pick him with someone like a Zyra, a Brand, even like a Malzahar right now, a Leona. Any champion that does have some sort of CC lockdown is great with Jhin, because it will just allow him to easily line up his W to chain that CC, and then you also have pretty good burst damage like with Jhin in the laning phase with your Q 4-shot combo. And then come late game, Jhin is definitely no slouch either, because his 4th shot crits, especially if it's like with a rapid fire cannon auto as well, that's going to deal a ton of damage. If you can get that off on a squishy target, then you're gonna chunk them to below half HP a lot of the time, so he can definitely still pump out a lot of damage in the late game too. And then for when you should not pick Jhin, I would try to avoid heavy dive comps. If they do have a few of them, then I would lean towards Caitlyn in that situation, and then like I touched on earlier, pick him with an aggressive support. And then if we move on to taking a look at the tier 2 champions now for this patch, they are going to be Vayne, Varus, Jinx, Draven, and Miss Fortune. So Vayne is dropping to tier 2 for this patch. The reason for it is because I feel like the champions in the tier 1 can just crap on her in the laning phase, and they can do a really good job at shutting her down. For example, if you've got like a Zigs Brand lane against a Vayne, then she's gonna have a very hard time in that laning phase, like just even farming. Of course, you still do have that potential to get to your mid to late game as Vayne, and if your team can hold out for you to get to that point, then you can still carry very well with her. But if you don't do too well in the laning phase and then your team also doesn't do very well, it is going to be pretty hard to carry with Vayne. Varus is moving up into the tier 2 for this patch. He did get buffs to his passive. I think it was in this patch or it might have been in the last patch, but those buffs definitely did help him out a lot. I think that Varus right now, if you can pair him up with a strong aggressive support, someone like a Leona, I've seen him have great success with in this patch. You can do really well in the laning phase and you can get a great snowball going. So for example, if you pair him up with a Leona and you hit level 6, if you hit your ultimate with Varus, the enemy's just straight up dead because Leona follows up with her ultimate with her EQ combo, and then if the enemy's not dead after you chain all of that CC, then you're probably pretty boosted or you did play it wrong. So right now I think he's a pretty good pick if you can play him correctly. And then I am moving Draven up into the tier 2 for this patch. I think that right now he is a great pick, especially against Vayne. Vayne still does have a really good pick rate right now, and she's picked in, I think, still like 30% of games. So if you are an experienced Draven player, then look to pick him into Vayne because you can do great in the laning phase. He is also getting buffed in 7.1, and remember I did say at the start of the video that this tier list is for like 6.24 and 7.1, so I think that in 7.1, if you do have experience on Draven, then you're going to do really well because your early game is getting even stronger. And then for Jinx and Misfortune, they're not moving up or down at all this patch. They're staying in the tier 2 like they were last patch, so I'm not going to talk about in detail as to why they're tier 2. But if we do take a look at the tier 3 champions now for this patch, they're going to be Ashe, Ezreal, and Kog'Maw. So these champions, or any champion that I do put in my tier 3, it usually means that they're really just not worth playing over the champions that are in tier 1 or tier 2 unless you are really experienced on them or unless you really know what you're doing. So for example, I wouldn't pick Ashe right now unless you're playing her like with a duo and you're playing her with like a good duo combo. So something like an Ashe Zyra lane or an Ashe Malzahar lane, then she can be pretty good in those situations. But if you're just playing her with like a standard support champion right now, I don't think she is as strong as some of the champions in my tier 1 or my tier 2. She's just been nerfed too much in my opinion in the past, so she is still decent, but only if you pair her up with a good support. And then kind of same goes for Kog'Maw that went for Ashe. He is a pretty situational pick. I would not look to pick him in all situations. I would only look to pick him if your team does have someone like a Janna or a Lulu, or your team is going to be playing one of those two supports, because he's just kind of a risky AD carry due to the fact that he can get caught out super easily in team fights. He can deal a load of damage. Like right now, I think Kog'Maw, he's got one of the best mid games for any AD carry, but if your team doesn't have a lot of peel, say you've got someone like a Brand support and you've got someone like a Quinn top lane, and then the rest of your roles just don't have any peel, then you're just gonna die every single team fight, so there's not really much point in picking Kog'Maw. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have not already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.